November 2014. Three identical towers rise from São Paulo's North Zone, housing 270 families behind cream-colored concrete and tinted glass. When the property manager receives complaints about rhythmic tapping behind bedroom walls in Building B, she dismisses them as plumbing. Then a maintenance log shows unauthorized entry to the 9th floor electrical shaft at 3:47 a.m., a space requiring 2 separate keys and written authorization. The building has 42 access points to technical corridors running vertically through all 12 floors, monitored by 8 analog cameras that cover less than 30% of the property. Christina has 72 hours to find out who's been living in the spaces between the walls before the residents demand answers she doesn't have. Cristina Moreno turned 43 the week she became property manager of residential Colina Norte. 2 years into the position, she'd learned that condominium administration meant making irreversible decisions with partial information. The budget demanded efficiency. The residents demanded security. Those two requirements rarely aligned, and the gap between them kept her awake most nights, reviewing spreadsheets and incident reports until her vision blurred. She'd built her management style on standardization. Every key tagged and logged, every contractor badge photographed, every shift change documented in duplicate. The system worked because it was simple, and it was vulnerable because simplicity meant gaps that someone with patience and knowledge could exploit. The first complaint arrived on a Tuesday. Apartment 907 reported intermittent knocking sounds behind the bedroom wall, always between midnight and 2 in the morning. Christina added it to the maintenance queue. Old buildings made noise. Pipes expanded and contracted. Residents heard what they expected to hear. The second complaint came Thursday. Apartment 1103, different tower, same phenomenon. This time the resident recorded 15 seconds of audio on her phone. Christina listened through earbuds in her office. 3 distinct taps, silence, 2 more taps, rhythm too deliberate for thermal expansion. She opened the building schematics on her monitor. The architectural plans from 2010 showed technical corridors running behind the residential units, housing electrical panels, water risers, and fire suppression lines. Access required authorization from management and physical keys held at the security desk. The corridors weren't designed for occupancy. They were 18 inches wide in most sections, expanding to 3 feet near junction boxes and equipment rooms. Christina pulled the access log from the past month. 7 authorized entries, all during business hours, all for scheduled maintenance. She cross-referenced the dates with the maintenance company's service records. Perfect match. No discrepancies. The third complaint arrived with the weekend shift report. Apartment 812 had called at 6 in the morning, insisting someone was moving inside the walls. The overnight guard noted the call but found nothing irregular during his rounds. 3 complaints in 5 days. Different floors, different towers. The pattern suggested either mass hysteria or something structural she hadn't identified. Christina scheduled an emergency inspection for Monday morning. Sunday evening, she received the incident report that changed everything. The overnight guard had noted an inconsistency during his 3:00 a.m. rounds. The steel door leading to Building B's 9th floor technical corridor stood slightly ajar. Protocol required it to be locked at all times. The guard had secured it and logged the incident. Christina arrived at the security office at 7 Monday morning. The guard from the previous night, Marcos, sat across from her with the logbook open. "The door wasn't forced," he said. "Lock mechanism worked fine. Someone opened it with a key." She reviewed the key inventory. 2 copies for Building B's technical access. Both hung on their designated hooks in the locked cabinet behind the security desk. She checked them personally, present and accounted for. "Could be a duplicate," Marcos said. "Maintenance companies make extras. Contractors borrow them. Sometimes they don't return them." Christina pulled the DVR footage from the overnight shift. 8 channels, each showing 4-hour loops before overwriting. The system covered the main lobby, garage entrance, and ground floor common areas. The 9th floor had no cameras. The technical corridors had no cameras. The budget allocated for security hadn't included comprehensive surveillance. She watched Channel 5, which captured the elevator bay in Building B. Between 3:15 and 3:50 a.m., no one entered or exited. The elevator didn't move. The stairwell door, visible at the edge of the frame, remained closed. 35 minutes during which someone had accessed a locked door on the 9th floor without using the elevators or stairs that led to it. Marcos leaned back in his chair. "There's another way up," he said. "The technical shafts connect vertically. If someone got into the ground floor mechanical room, they could climb." Christina had worked in property management for 6 years. She understood structural systems, liability protocols, and resident psychology. She also understood that admitting the building had unsecured vertical passages would trigger immediate panic and probable litigation. "We inventory every key," she said. "We audit the access logs. If there's a duplicate, we find it and change the locks." Quietly. "And if it's not about the keys?" Marcos asked. She didn't answer. The question implied scenarios she wasn't ready to consider. The key inventory took 4 hours. Christina worked with Luana, the administrative assistant, checking every tagged key against the master list. They found 3 discrepancies. 2 keys for storage units that had been replaced and never removed from inventory. 1 key for Building B technical access that didn't match the original manufacturer's pattern. The key was older, the brass darkened with handling, the cut slightly irregular. Someone had made it manually, copying the profile without access to the original blanks. "How long has this been here?" Christina asked. Luana shook her head. "Could be months. We don't audit the board daily, just when someone requests access." Christina held the key up to the light. The copy was good enough to work, but crude enough to identify. Whoever made it had skill, but not professional equipment. She thought about the maintenance contractors, the cleaning staff, the 12 different service companies that cycled through the property each month. Any of them could have borrowed a key, pressed it into clay, and made an impression. She called an emergency meeting with the maintenance supervisor and the head of security. Both men arrived within an hour, both defensive before she'd finished explaining. "Our people don't do that," the maintenance supervisor said. "Every technician is background checked and trained." "Someone did it," Christina said. "Someone has been accessing the technical areas without authorization. I need to know who." The discussion circled through accusations and denials for 20 minutes before Marcos proposed the controlled test. Send someone up to the 9th floor using the official key, monitor the cameras, time the access, and inspect the corridor thoroughly. If they found evidence of unauthorized entry, they'd expand the investigation. If they found nothing, they'd secure the duplicate key and move on. Christina agreed. Sunday morning, minimal resident traffic, reduced risk of observation. She would coordinate from the security office while Marcos conducted the inspection. Sunday arrived overcast and humid. Christina sat before the monitor array at 9:00 a.m., watching Marcos enter Building B's lobby. The elevator rose to the 9th floor. 4 minutes elapsed. The elevator descended empty. 6 more minutes passed. Her phone remained silent. The expected check-in didn't come. At minute 14, Marcos emerged from the stairwell into the lobby, moving faster than usual. He returned to the security office with dirt on his knees and a tightness around his eyes that Christina recognized as controlled alarm. "The secondary door," he said. "The one that opens to the emergency shaft. It was closed but not locked. Just the latch engaged. And inside on the floor, food wrappers, granola bar packages, an empty water bottle. Someone's been spending time in there." "How long?" Christina asked. "Wrapper dates go back 3 weeks, but there's more." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. The image showed an electrical panel with the cover removed, exposing the circuit breakers and wiring. "These panels aren't supposed to be opened without an electrician present. Someone's been tampering with them." Christina studied the photograph. The exposed wiring showed signs of recent manipulation, fresh tool marks on the screws, displaced dust patterns. "Show me where this connects," she said. Marcos opened the building schematic on the office computer. The 9th floor electrical panel fed power to apartments 901 through 910. If someone knew what they were doing, he said, they could cut power to specific units, create a distraction, or just shut down cameras if we'd installed them in the corridors. "We need a full inspection," Christina said. "Every technical corridor, every access point, every panel. I want to know how extensive this is." She assembled a team: Marcos, 2 guards from the day shift, and a senior maintenance technician she trusted. They started at the ground floor and worked upward, methodically checking each access point and documenting everything with photographs and written notes. The inspection revealed 4 critical vulnerabilities: a 30-centimeter gap behind the main fire suppression duct that allowed vertical movement between floors without using stairs or elevators, electrical panels on floors 7, 9, and 11 with security seals broken or missing, a secondary access door on the 12th floor that could be opened from inside the shaft without a key, and in the corner of the 11th floor technical corridor, a rolled sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a jacket that smelled of cigarette smoke and sweat. Someone had been living in the building's hidden spaces, not squatting in a vacant apartment, living in the infrastructure itself, moving through passages that maintenance rarely inspected and residents never saw. Christina photographed everything. She documented the locations, measured the gaps, and collected the personal items as evidence. The implications cascaded through her mind: liability exposure, insurance complications, resident panic, media attention. Every scenario ended with her standing before an angry assembly, explaining how someone had infiltrated the property undetected for weeks. She returned to her office and began drafting a report. The facts demanded notification. The building council needed to know. The residents deserved transparency, but releasing partial information would trigger speculation and fear that could destabilize the entire community. She chose containment. Report to the council only. No general announcement. Continue the investigation quietly while implementing immediate security enhancements. She scheduled an emergency council session for that evening. The 5 council members arrived at 7. Christina presented the evidence methodically: the unauthorized key, the tampering with electrical panels, the personal items in the technical corridors, the vertical gap that allowed movement through the building's hidden arteries. "You're saying someone's been living here?" Councilwoman Ferreira said. "Inside the walls?" "The evidence suggests intermittent presence," Christina said. "Someone who knows the building's layout and maintenance schedules, possibly a former employee or contractor." "We need to call the police," Councilman Torres said. "This is trespassing, breaking and entering, possibly worse." "We need to contain this before it becomes public," Councilwoman Mendez countered. "One news story about an intruder living in the walls and property values collapse." The meeting devolved into procedural debate: police notification versus private investigation, immediate transparency versus gradual disclosure, emergency assembly versus need-to-know communication. Christina let them argue while she calculated the practical steps required. Finally, she interrupted. "I propose a lockdown protocol. We seal every technical access point with numbered tamper evidence seals. We check them every 6 hours. If someone's still accessing these spaces, we'll know within 24 hours. Meanwhile, we contract a security audit to identify every vulnerability. Once we have complete documentation, we decide on police involvement and resident notification." The motion passed 4-1. Christina had 72 hours to convert theory into actionable security. The next morning, she hired an external security consultant. The man arrived with thermal cameras, motion sensors, and 3 decades of corporate investigation experience. He spent 6 hours examining the property, photographing access points, and testing locks. His report confirmed Christina's fears. The building had been designed with maintenance efficiency as priority, security as afterthought. The technical corridors, meant for quarterly inspections, had become forgotten spaces. 2 of the locks showed signs of manipulation consistent with copied keys. The vertical shaft gap was large enough for an adult to climb through if they had climbing experience and no fear of heights. "Your intruder knows this building intimately," the consultant said. "Former maintenance worker is my guess. Someone who spent months learning the blind spots before deciding to exploit them." "Can we secure it?" Christina asked. "Yes, but it requires investment. New locks on every technical door, welded grates over the vertical shafts, motion sensors in the corridors. Camera coverage expanded from 8 channels to at least 24. You're looking at significant budget overrun." Christina ran the numbers. The security upgrade would consume 18% of the annual maintenance budget. She'd have to reallocate funds from planned renovations, defer the lobby remodeling, and postpone the playground upgrades that residents had been requesting for 2 years. She authorized the spending. The alternative was waiting for the intruder to escalate from trespassing to something worse. The new seals went into place Wednesday morning. Bright yellow strips with sequential numbers, impossible to remove and replace without leaving evidence. Marcos personally inspected them every 6 hours, logging each check with photograph documentation. Thursday at 2:00 p.m. Seal number 17 on the 8th floor technical door showed signs of tampering. Not torn, just lifted at one corner and pressed back down, leaving a wrinkle in the adhesive. Someone had tested it to see if anyone was watching. Friday at 10:00 a.m. Seal number 24 was cut cleanly with a sharp blade. The door remained locked, but someone had sent a message. "I know you're watching, and I can still get in." Christina reviewed the camera footage from both incidents. No one approached those doors from the corridors the cameras covered. The intruder was using the internal passages, moving through the walls, while the visible building continued its normal routines. She made the decision that would later define her tenure as property manager. She authorized a presence analysis, cross-referencing registered residents with actual observed foot traffic. If someone was living in the building but not using the main entrances, their apartment would show unusual patterns. The analysis took 2 days. Luana compiled entrance and exit data from the security logs, matching timestamps with apartment numbers. Most units showed predictable rhythms: morning exodus for work, evening returns, weekend irregularities. 3 apartments on the 11th floor showed anomalies. 2 were documented as vacant, the owners traveling abroad. The 3rd was registered to a resident named Alberto Fonseca, who hadn't passed through the main gates in 17 days, despite utilities showing active usage. Christina requested a wellness check. The building's regulations allowed management access to any unit after 14 days of no contact if utilities suggested continued occupancy. She assembled a team, herself, Marcos, and a council representative to witness the inspection. They knocked on apartment 1107. No answer. Christina used the master key. The door opened 6 inches before catching on the security chain, which shouldn't have been engaged if no one was home. Through the gap, she saw an empty living room, furniture covered with sheets, no signs of recent occupation. "Maintenance override," she said to Marcos. He returned with bolt cutters. The chain snapped. They entered. The apartment smelled of dust and closed air. The living room and kitchen showed no signs of use. The bedrooms were empty, mattresses bare. But the small maid's room at the back, a space most modern residents used for storage, told a different story. A mattress on the floor, a camping stove, 3 changes of clothes folded neatly in the corner, a plastic bin filled with non-perishable food, electrical cables jury-rigged to tap power from the wall outlet without registering on the apartment's meter, and on the small desk, a stack of building schematics, old maintenance schedules, and shift rotation patterns. "He's been studying us," Marcos said quietly, "learning when we patrol, when we check the logs, when we're vulnerable." Christina photographed everything. The setup suggested someone organized and patient, someone who'd converted a vacant apartment into a base of operations while spending significant time in the technical corridors. She found no identification, no personal documents, nothing that revealed who was behind this calculated infiltration. The maid's room window faced the rear of the property, overlooking the service area where trash and recycling were stored. A person could enter through the ground floor maintenance entrance, climb through the technical shafts, and emerge in this apartment without ever appearing on camera. The system she'd trusted to provide security had been systematically bypassed. She called an emergency council session for that evening. This time she included the full resident assembly. 200 people crowded into the common room, demanding explanations she'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. Christina presented the evidence: the unauthorized access, the duplicate key, the personal items in the technical corridors, the occupied apartment that shouldn't have been occupied. She spoke calmly, factually, without speculation. "We believe the intruder is a former maintenance worker," she said. "Someone familiar with the property's structure and operations. The police have been notified and are investigating. In the meantime, we're implementing comprehensive security upgrades." The questions came rapid and accusatory. Why hadn't they been informed sooner? How long had this been happening? Was anyone in danger? Could this happen again? Christina answered what she could and acknowledged what she didn't know. The intruder's identity remained unknown. His motives were unclear. No residents had been harmed, but the psychological violation was undeniable. Someone had been living in their walls, watching their routines, studying their vulnerabilities. The assembly voted to authorize the security overhaul, 24 new cameras, electronic keycard system, monthly inspections of all technical areas. The budget impact meant doubling the monthly maintenance fees for 6 months. Christina's re-election as property manager passed by a narrow margin, 52% in favor. The opposition argued she should have caught this sooner, that her cost-cutting measures had prioritized efficiency over safety. The police investigation yielded minimal results. Fingerprints from the apartment matched no one in the system. The personal items provided no leads. The schematics could have been obtained from city records. The intruder had been careful, methodical, and ultimately invisible. 3 weeks after the discovery, the technical corridors remained quiet. The new locks and sensors detected no further intrusions. The welded grates over the vertical shafts eliminated the climbing route. The electronic key system created digital logs that couldn't be forged or forgotten. But the noises behind the walls continued. Apartment 1204 reported tapping at night. Apartment 615 heard footsteps in the ceiling. Apartment 909 insisted someone was breathing in the ventilation shaft. The maintenance teams found nothing. The sensors registered no movement. The cameras showed empty corridors. Christina listened to each report and documented each inspection. She knew what the residents wouldn't accept, that old buildings made noise, that imagination fed fear, that the knowledge of past intrusion created present paranoia. She also knew something else, something she didn't include in her official reports. The intruder had taken his belongings but left the schematics. The papers showed notations in pencil, marking passages she hadn't known existed, junction points the original architects had buried in technical drawings. No one consulted anymore. The building had more hidden spaces than her inspection had revealed. And somewhere in those spaces, perhaps sealed behind new locks, perhaps simply dormant, the possibility remained that someone who'd learned to disappear could choose to return. She kept the marked schematics in her office safe. Late at night, when the building settled into its rhythms of elevator hums and air conditioning cycles, she studied them, tracing the passages with her finger, counting the access points, calculating how many blind spots remained even after the security upgrade. The residents learned to live with uncertainty. Children were instructed not to play near utility rooms. Elderly residents requested apartment transfers to lower floors, away from the technical corridors. The property values dipped but stabilized. Life continued with the shared knowledge that walls were not solid, that spaces existed beyond sight, that someone had proven the building's secrets were accessible to those with patience and knowledge. Christina remained property manager for 3 more years. She never caught the intruder. The police closed the case after 6 months. The insurance company paid for the security upgrades but increased the property's liability premiums. She established quarterly inspections of all technical areas, a protocol that became standard across the management company's portfolio. But she never forgot the moment she'd stood in apartment 1107. Looking at the neat arrangements of someone who'd made a home in negative space. The camping stove, the folded clothes, the methodical documentation of routines. It wasn't the intrusion that haunted her, it was the discipline, the patience, the complete absence of urgency in someone who'd learned to exist in parallel with an entire community, invisible and undisturbed. On her last day as property manager, she conducted a final walkthrough of the technical corridors. The new locks gleamed. The sensors blinked their status lights. The cameras recorded every angle. She stood in the 11th floor technical space, where the rolled sleeping bag had been found, and listened. The building hummed around her. water moving through pipes, electricity flowing through conduits. The subtle vibration of 3 towers supporting hundreds of lives. And beneath it all, or perhaps woven into it, the possibility of presence. Someone who knew these sounds. Someone who'd learned to move with them rather than against them. Someone who'd chosen to leave but knew the way back. She locked the door behind her and descended to ground level. The residents would elect a new manager. The security systems would be maintained. The building would continue its function, providing shelter and safety to families who trusted that walls meant privacy and locks meant security. But Christina knew what the schematics had taught her, that every building contains spaces its occupants never see, passages that exist in the gaps between intention and implementation, and that someone with sufficient motivation can find ways to inhabit those spaces, invisible to cameras and unrecorded in logs, present in the negative space where architecture creates possibility. The intruder never returned, or if he did, no one noticed. The noises behind the walls faded into background texture, explained away as settlement and thermal stress. The marked schematics remained in the safe, consulted occasionally by new management, filed as historical documentation of a resolved anomaly. And sometimes, late at night when the building was quiet, residents would pause in their routines and listen, not certain they heard anything, but not certain they didn't. The sound of someone existing just beyond reach, patient and practiced, waiting in the spaces between the walls.